tell ya, I'm starting to think that the real stars of this show are in the music department. And if you're watching Titans, I think you totally know what I mean. I mean, when the show starts and they have that great like acoustic, electric, I don't know what instruments they're using, but they play it over like the DC opening from the movies, right? And they have the Titans logo come up, and I'm like, yeah! And you know, the show never gets that good, quite frankly, but they raise my hopes and excitement so high that even though I come down, I still end up in a pretty high spot, right? It also reminds me a lot of the Wonder Woman theme, to be honest, which is equally effective. And throughout the episode, what's on screen is constantly given a serious boost, either by Kevin Kiner and Clint Mansell's score. I want to give credit where credit is due. As I said, these are the real stars here, right? Or the song selections, particularly good in this episode and very varied, too. You know, a lot of range from Gary Calamar, music supervisor. Good job, guys! Now, as for the episode itself, I'm reviewing episode 4 individually because it introduces Doom Patrol. In fact, the Warner Brothers television press office sent me this episode in advance. They were like, oh, Doom Patrol, you can watch it now, but you can't review it until Friday. And so I was like, this must be something special. It's Doom Patrol. And now that I've seen both teams, the DC Universe versions, I gotta tell ya, I like both teams. But you know what occurred to me while I was watching this episode? The story didn't really require either of them. It's just generic superhero 101, right? I mean, you could swap in any superheroes to this story, and it totally feels that way as the episode unfolds. And as superhero shows and movies proliferate, I think that's something the creative people working on these projects really need to ask themselves. What makes this a Titans story? What makes this a Doom Patrol story? And considering this was written by Jeff Johns, I think it's really bad that he didn't, you can kind of excuse someone coming from Hollywood who's just like, superheroes, right? Let's see what's going on over here. But, Jeff Johns comes from this world. And I think that while he's responsible for some of the better elements of this episode, which were very comic book-like, he should, I think, have been able to deliver something a little bit more unique, because both teams are unique and have the ability to stand out. And therefore, as I said, there is some good stuff here, and we'll talk about it in a moment. But I'd also like to point out before we go into the specifics that we're 4 episodes into this series now and have spent very little time with the Titans themselves because of guest appearances by Hawk and Dove in episode 2 and now Doom Patrol in episode 4, where these characters don't just show up but take over their respective episodes, which, again, that's fine. But this, I would much rather have a deep dive into the darker, more realistic versions of the Titans that's being developed here, particularly because I am kind of into it, right? But instead, they're serving us like some kind of DC tour guides, which is, I'm kind of enjoying that too, but it's also a little frustrating, as I'm sure I'd be curious if you're feeling the same way. If you're watching this show, I'm curious how many people are actually watching it. I think that, we've been talking about this recently because there have been some other bad first impressions for shows, and people are like, some people are like, it might be better when you see it, but you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And I think that a lot of people have maybe decided it's not worth paying for that first impression that's still kind of affecting them. And so that's why it's so important to get your ad campaigns for these shows, particularly in such a crowded landscape, off to the right start. So people do, put that money down to watch this stuff. Maybe some of you are waiting till you can binge watch it. But again, I told you, we'll see. I don't know if DC Universe will keep all the episodes up because maybe they might be on to you. All right, so let's talk about Doom Patrol, where here, Ryan Potter's Beast Boy is a member of the team. And his first team affiliation in the comics was also Doom Patrol. So that is a nice touch. But, he spends very little time with the team before, of course, he joins the Titans. Now, as cool as Gar's basement room is, it's basically Quicksilver's basement room, right? But thankfully, Ryan Potter is so good in this role and is as equally charismatic and interesting as Evan Peters was in his role, that he still steals pretty much every scene that he's in. Also like Evan Peters, right? I really like Ryan Potter here. And I think, well, he is like kind of like there for comedic effect. He's also really good giving off serious leading man vibes. And as we look to diversify for Asian talent, I think Ryan Potter is really stepping up to the plate. He could be another Henry Golding, I think, to be honest with you. He's very charismatic, very good. Also, the green paw print on his other shoulder is everything. And I can't believe they hid that in the promotional material. It's such a charming touch that's so in character. I think it would have really pleased fans. I loved seeing it. I guess they were like, no, we're going to reveal it in the show. But I think it would have really softened the initial negative reactions if people had known that was there. Really, when they were shooting the stuff, I can't believe someone on set wasn't like, can you just turn them a little bit? Because I think that's going to make a huge difference. I'm curious, does it make a huge difference to you? Then April Bowlby is Elasti-girl, a.k.a. Rita Farr. A Hollywood actress turned, well, here, kind of Clayface, basically. That's the direction they decided to go with the character, who, by the way, also was an actor before, his horrific fate. Now, I've been a fan of Bowlby since her days on Drop Dead Diva, and I wish she worked more. And I wish her role was bigger here. But of course, she is going to be part of the ongoing series. But she has a lovely moment in this episode at the dinner table where, having to eat an obscene amount of food because of her powers/curse, right? Bowlby has just the right mix of genuine hunger and embarrassment. It was really a very touching moment. She was great. I loved her in this role. Now, Brendan Fraser voices Robotman, as of course was announced at New York Comic Con. And it really just feels like a waste of Brendan Fraser, right? And the show can't afford to do Robotman, quite frankly. And they can't afford to do Negative Man either, with Matt Bomer nowhere to be seen, or I think even heard. He might not have been cast at this point. But seeing the role, I can't believe Matt Bomer would be interested. Those must be some amazing flashbacks he's going to partake in. And I'm sure they are, but I don't know. Again, it seems like, I guess it's cheap to use them because they just have to do a couple of flashbacks and then do voiceover work, right? So maybe you can get big names attached to this show because it's less of a commitment. But I think from a fan, that's like a business perspective. I think from a fan perspective, since those are such fan favorites, if you saw Brendan Fraser recently on the FX Getty show, so good. It really is just frustrating to have them so close yet so far. And I really liked Bruno Bashir, brother of Demian Bashir, as Dr. Calder, a.k.a. the Chief, and having the stereotypical science before compassion role played by a Mexican actor made it seem fresh. And I can't believe, at first I was like, I'm so happy for you, Bruno Bashir, you got a series. No, he didn't, because they're replacing with Timothy Dalton for the show. And that seems like a PR nightmare to me, to diversify a role and then switch it back for the exact same incarnation of the team. It's crazy. I can't believe that they did that. And I wonder, again, I don't know if enough people are paying attention to these shows, but that seems pretty bad. Then, while the DC Universe can't afford some of the Doom Patrol characters, once again, they nail the location. Just like Wayne Manor, the Doom Patrol mansion is equally impressive in its ornateness, atmosphere, and size. I loved going around that house. It was really, really cool. And it was just the perfect house for the team. I believed it was the Doom Patrol mansion, just as I believe the Wayne Manor on this show is Wayne Manor. Usually when I see it, it's like, that's like Wayne Manor light. Like it's the best the production could do. But here I'm like, that's legit. I also love the darker Frankenstein aspects highlighted here. A team of experiments. Bruno Bashir's Dr. Calder has such a great line. He says, they were doomed, and yet here they all sit, eating dessert. And then, of course, they cut to Robotman, who can't eat. And he's like, not me. And it's a fabulous line because it's the Chief's romantic and somewhat blind and twisted view of what he's doing, right? He only looks at the positive and is willfully blind to the negative of what he's done. Really cool stuff. It reminded me actually of what Josh Trank tried to do with the Fantastic Four, which I also thought had tremendous potential, but unfortunately never got to be realized. And I hope this potential is realized. I also love the idea that each member of the Doom Patrol comes from a different time period, which they only did a little bit with, and I hope that it's played up more in the series. And perhaps it will be, because they'll have more time to do so. And I'm now excited for that show, so I guess their appearance here has served its purpose, even if the quality of that appearance was not as strong as it should or could be. And you'll notice I didn't mention the other Titans at all, because they're barely in this episode, right? Raven has a lot of screen time and throws a temper tantrum, let's say, right? But it's all pretty standard for her already. And I think the fact that I'm kind of already like, yeah, that's just Raven, only on the 4th episode, is not so great for the character. She remains likable, but I guess there were some developments, but I'm like, just hurry up already. All right. I did like, though, seeing Dick and Kory spend more time together, right? You can see them starting to maybe gel as a couple. They don't really seem like a couple, but they didn't in the comics either, which is what made them so interesting. And I guess Kory does seem more experienced than Dick, but now she's more experienced than Dick, I think, in many ways, besides just sexually. And they also start to become the mom and dad of the team, so to speak, which I also think is very true to the comics. But I really don't like overly violent Dick Grayson. Not only is it horribly out of character, but it steals from other Robins, which continues to frustrate me. Finally, get over yourself, DC Universe. Constantly and randomly throwing in the F word does not make you cool. It just makes you trying too hard. But overall, I would still recommend this episode, and I continue to think this Titans show is worthwhile. But four episodes in, it's starting to seem more like Gotham, but not Gotham at its best, like the more mediocre episodes of Gotham, than I think a stellar series like, say, a comic book series like, say, Daredevil, which I think it has the potential to be. All right, so those are my thoughts for Titans Episode 4, Doom Patrol. Share your own down below. And of course, as always, you can check out some more episodes right now.